The screen door slams. Mary's dress waves. The screen door slams. Mary's dress waves. Like a vision, she dances across the porch as the radio plays. Roy Orbison singing for the lonely. Hey, that's me, and I want you only. Don't turn me on again. Don't turn me home again. I just can't face myself alone again. Don't run back inside, darling. You know just what I'm here for. So you're scared. And maybe you're thinking that maybe we ain't that young anymore. Show a little faith. There's magic in the night. You ain't a beauty, but hey, you're all right. And that's all right with me. You can hide neath your covers and study your pain. Make crosses from your lovers, throw roses in the rain. Waste your summer praying in vain for a savior to rise from these streets. Well, now I'm no hero, that's understood. All the redemption I can offer, girl, is beneath this dirty hood, with a chance to make it good somehow. Hey, what else can we do now? Except roll down the window and let the wind blow back your hair. Well, the night's bustin' open. These two lanes will take us anywhere. We got one last chance to make it real, to trade in these wings on some wheels. Climb in back. Heaven's waiting on down the tracks. Oh, come take my hand. We're riding out tonight to case the promised land. Oh, Thunder Road, oh, Thunder Road, oh, Thunder Road. Lying out there like a killer in the sun. Hey, I know it's late. We can make it if we run. Oh, Thunder Road, sit tight. Take hold. Thunder Road. Well, I got this guitar and I learned how to make it talk. And my car's out back if you're ready to take that long walk. From your front porch to my front seat, the door's open, but the ride, it ain't free. And I know you're lonely for words that I ain't spoken, but tonight we'll be free. All the promises will be broken. There were ghosts in the eyes of all the boys you sent away. They haunt this dusty beach road in the skeleton frames of burned out Chevrolets. They scream your name at night in the street. Your graduation gown lies rags at their feet. You hear their engines roaring on, but when you get to the porch, they're gone on the wind. So Mary, climb in. It's a town full of losers, and I'm pulling out of here to win. That was Bruce Springsteen's Thunder Road. I don't know if you guys have been keeping up with Howard Stern. He did a fantastic interview with Bruce Springsteen not too long ago, and you should really check it out, as well as check out his work. But let's move on to today's topic. What are Sam Bankman-Fried's ethics? And more importantly, does he have any? Well, I was, minding my own business, watching the commentary track to Chinatown, the movie. Great movie. Try to bring the space up here so you can see who's talking. They said that was important. Anyway, in Chinatown, the movie, there's a main character, and he's a bad guy, right? Now, you guys aren't going to watch it, so I'll explain just a little bit. He's willing to take the water from Los Angeles, right? He's willing to take the water from the farmers in the fields, and he's willing to take the water so that he can make money off that water, right? This big bad man wants to redirect the water. And they were talking on the commentary of Chinatown that Chinatown, the film in the world, it exists in 1936, I want to say maybe. But it's before World War II. It's before the evil of Hitler. It's before we've really seen the lowest of men's characters, how bad we can go. And so here's just a little bit I wanted to play. I'm going to I'll advance a little here because I know you guys don't know what Chinatown is. But this is Robert Towne, the screenwriter of Chinatown, and David Fincher, director of Fight Club, a variety of other great movies, talking about evil. Let's see if we can get this going.
Right. And yet I wanted to give him some underlying sense of morality that would respond with absolute horror.
And he's so protective of it. You know what I mean? That's the thing that makes him ultimately honorable in this completely compromised world.
Yeah. The magnitude of what Noah Cross is willing to do, which is absolutely ravage a community, destroy it, take land to make money on it, and basically rape the land and his daughter.
Yeah.
And that is, World War II hadn't happened.
Yeah.
And that kind of evil was not something that he would be used to dealing with.
Right.
And I wanted to have that.
World War II hadn't happened yet. That this man, the villain of Chinatown, was willing to rape the land and to rape his daughter. Spoiler alert if you haven't seen Chinatown, but we should all watch Chinatown by now. Anyway, think about that kind of evil, and then think about Geddes, Jack Nicholson, the detective, being unprepared for that kind of evil, that it's unparalleled, that he doesn't just say, oh, I know about genocide, right? I know about evil. I've seen the speeches and the angry voices and what happens before a genocide. I know about the evil. And then I came back to this FTX thing, and I came back to taking all these people's money and having no board and having no organization to send the money out, right? We're all reading the reports by the accounting documents are all over Twitter, and they're saying that there was no one at the top of this thing, that the decisions were made in a chat room, and the chat room was erased, and there was no board of directors, and they just decided kind of willy-nilly what they were going to do with the money. And it wasn't just their money, right? Sadly, it was probably some of your money in the audience here. It was banks and investment funds. It was retirement accounts. It was people that wanted to get that Matt Damon crypto.com fortune favors the bold, or perhaps he said the brave. Either way, it was their money that he took. And it was just interesting to me to think about this person without ethics. And then, of course, they already know where I'm going in the chat, because I'm going to play a little bit of Miller's Crossing from 1990. This is the Coen brothers, another film that you probably haven't seen that you should see. It's a great movie. It's available to everyone anywhere. You have the choice of what you watch. You don't have to watch new movies. You could watch old ones. Anyway, this is the opening scene of Miller's Crossing. And what he talks about here is he talks about, these are two gangsters talking, an Irish gangster and an Italian gangster. And they're talking about a fixed fight, right? They're talking about an athletic competition that isn't an athletic competition, right? It's fixed. They've paid someone to take a dive. And they're talking about the ethics of that if one pays for something to be fixed, one should get the benefits of that fix. There it goes.
I'm talking about Frank. I'm talking about character. I'm talking about... Hell, Leo, I ain't embarrassed to use the word. I'm talking about ethics. You know I'm a sporting man. I like to lay the occasional bet, but I ain't that sporting. When I fix a fight, say I pay a 3-1 favorite to throw a goddamn fight, I figure I got the right to expect that fight to go off at 3-1. But every time I lay a bet with a son of a bitch burning burn bomb, before I know it, the odds is even up. Or worse, I'm betting on the short money. The Sheeny knows I like short things. He's selling the information. I fixed the fight. Out-of-town money comes pouring in. The odds go straight to hell. I don't know who he's selling to. Maybe the Los Angeles Combine. I don't know. The point is, Bernie ain't satisfied with the honest dollar he can make off the pick. He ain't satisfied with the business I do on his book. He is selling tips on how I bet. And that means part of the payoff that should be riding on my hip is riding on someone else's. So, back we go to these questions. Friendship, character, ethics.
So it really does matter. Even when you're surrounded by thieves and you're fixing a fight, it matters that you have a general moral code, that you have what we call ethics. Let's go ahead and get a definition on that. Ethics, here we go. Ethics are moral principles that govern a person's behavior on the conducting of an activity. Ethics is a branch of knowledge that deals with moral principles. So neither metaphysics nor ethics is the home of religion. Interesting little example sentence, but yes, moral principles. Now, what's unique about Sam is that he seems to have moral principles, right? He's published that he's a fan of ethical altruism. And that's been basically defined to me as being altruistic, but trying to maximize your altruism by making a lot of money. And the reason that we could trust Sam is because he had a lot of money and because he hung out with people who had a lot of money. So it didn't much matter about their ethics or their character. It was this money that supported them, this money that propped them up and gave them this position of power. Now, sure, Caroline's father was friends with Gensler, and they were plugged in politically. But would they have been plugged in politically if they didn't have the money? We're going to an example here. Again, we might lose our ad rights and get banned from YouTube and all that. So here we go. But this is Jonathan Mann at Song a Day Man with 2 N's. And he does a song a day. And he did a great song today about Sam and Carolyn. And this goes a little bit to their ethics.
Okay, Sam was having meetings with Gary. Gary used to work for Glenn.
It's very loud. Let's try it. Sorry, everyone. Let's try it one more time, maybe a little quieter.
Okay, Sam was having meetings with Gary. Gary used to work for Glenn. Glenn is the papa of Caroline, and she was stooping Sam. It's regulatory capture of the highest degree, assisted by the New York Times, Congress, and MIT.
So that's pretty much the gist of it. You catch it, but it's regulatory capture. And it's also interesting to see these relationships between Sam and Glenn and Caroline laid out in this nice Brady Bunch grid. You can't beat that. So let's see. It looks like Daniel's here. Let's see if, Twitter's. It's going to be funny as the Twitter platform slowly collapses. Let me tell you that I expect more crashes from Twitter in the future. If I had to say one thing that I look forward to, it's going to be, things are going to go up and down. I don't have any faith in the future of the technicals of Twitter. So Daniel, how's it going? We were talking about the ethics of Sam Bankman-Fried and if he has any.
Yeah, this should be a short conversation.
What's so funny, though, is that much like other people, he's put his supposed ethics out there on the line. Now, sir, we've all read the Vox interview. We've seen the tweets direct from his own mouth where he says that he doesn't think regulation would work, which is a complete flip on what he said previously. She kind of questions him and pokes him a little on the effective altruism thing. And it just seems like a lot of this was window dressing. So maybe it's important to have false ethics that you could later get rid of.
Yeah, that never happens in this industry.
What they say in Lady Macbeth, be not the flower, but be the serpent underneath. Surprising. It's and it's just, if you can't trust them, who can you trust? I wonder about the TV stations, though, because I heard a lot of blame today, and they're blaming Sam for this, and they're blaming the fact that they didn't have a board for this, and they're blaming all that. But then I say, what about these TV stations that just blindly aired these advertisements? And
well, they were paid to air them. I don't think they have to do this kind of research and due diligence. They just assume that if this advertiser can afford to pay them, then the money's good. They'll run the ad.
That seems pretty unethical for them. It seems like they were advertising kind of a questionable Ponzi scheme right there on their air, right next to their other advertisements. In fact, it kind of makes me wonder who vets their other advertisements. Are these other things
You
okay?
have to wonder that. Exactly. And I think this might be a wake-up call for the advertising industry to begin thinking about the types of financial products that they represent. But then, you also have to extend that to sports stadiums and celebrity endorsements and kind of everything in the space that falls under the line of advertising, promotion, PR. Isn't there a class action suit naming Tom Brady now? Like, didn't he do any research before he decided to hop on this bandwagon?
Oh, wait
You'd
till
think
they
that
get a
someone
hold
with
of
his
the
stature would have a whole team of lawyers looking into this.
sure, Tom Brady, but what about the TB12 diet? He's just busy drinking a lot of water.
Can't speak to that one.
But yeah, it is interesting to see all these other people who are involved in it, and now they're all pointing fingers at who's at fault. And it really comes back to this idea of ethics. Now, so you think that Sam had, if he had no, okay, so let's say that Sam's front facing ethics were untrue. Sam, everyone's typing at me and talking at me at the same time, but Sam was dishonest with his ethics, right? He said he had good ethics. He said actually great ethics. He was kind of bragging about his ethics. His ethics were better than your ethics. He was going to give away $1 million. You don't even have any money. He was going to give away $1 billion. You still don't have any money. No, it just seems like he had, false ethics. So what were his real ethics? Do you think he had just kind of might makes right?
It's hard to say. I mean, he might have had ideals that he wanted to try to uphold or represent as his own, but clearly, when they say about money corrupting, I think that he let it all go to his head. He's an immature gentleman. He was in his 20s when he made billions, and I think he just didn't have a clue what to do with it at that point.
So again, who was at fault at this? Do you think it was his parents, his law professor parents? Why didn't they teach him like what he was supposed to do? Was this a religious failing? I mean, do you think Sam didn't have religion, or maybe needed more religion?
No, I don't think so, because I mean there are plenty of other both religious and atheist people who don't have this level of moral depravity. I don't think you can assign that as being the cause. They say often religion is the refuge of a scoundrel. So if someone's too religious, you have to wonder about that too. No, I think he was weak, right? He was weak with as an individual. He was weak-willed. He saw an opportunity to make more money than he'd ever imagined in his lifetime, and that with that came the illusion of power, and it may have corrupted him. Now there are plenty of other billionaires who aren't corrupted by their wealth. I don't think you can make a blanket statement about everyone who comes into money being completely depraved, but in his case, he didn't have the, I'm sure he had a moral upbringing as a child, but clearly it didn't produce a result in his 20s.
So you're trading and you make like $1 billion, and then you have $1 billion. I mean, for me, I would, don't you go out and spend some of that? Maybe you buy all the stuff you always wanted. I guess at a certain point you don't want anymore, and you come back to the trading and you're like, well, I guess I'm going to trade some more. I'm going to make 2 billion. I'm going to make 20 billion. I'm going to make 40 billion. I'm going to make a really big company. Like, I guess it's just mountain climbing stuff. I guess if we want to start about his ethics, we also have to kind of look into his mental state. It seems like he was living in what they're now calling a polycule, which is the word poly attached to the word molecule. I don't know how much sense that makes, but they say him and at least one girl and multiple other guys, and I don't know the details yet, but I'm sure we'll learn them soon, allegedly, of course. We're all living together in a big, nice, fancy $30 million apartment in the Bahamas, and they were the ones making all these decisions. They were the ones sending the money around, and they were in a polycule, and when they were on drugs, not good drugs. They were on stimulants. They were on essentially some kind of speed. It was doctor prescribed. It's an Alzheimer's medication. And apparently it kept them sharp for trading. So a lot of this is like a high pressure activity, right? Let's assume for a second that they're actually trading, right? They're actually trading. They're making bets. They're covering bets. They're winning. They're losing, right? It's a lot of excitement. But Then they need the drugs, then they're trading some more, then they're trading some more. Then somehow this Alameda thing runs up a bunch of debts. And he says, sure, we're going to cover the girlfriend's company, and they drain the money out. Do you think it happens slowly? Do you think it happens quickly?
I mean, it seemed like it happened quickly. Like I never heard of SBF until maybe a year ago. So suddenly this company came out of nowhere, has incredible, I'm going to say, success in their early trading activity. Yeah, I think, it ended up devolving into a lot of sort of degenerate behavior that probably chipped away at any morality that any of them had. And the drugs certainly didn't help. I'm sure that contributed to it. It's hard to know. It's hard to get in someone's head to really understand, the decisions that they made. But it seems like, a combination of things, right? The sloppy accounting, the no sense of responsibility over customer deposits. This false belief that they could make back the losses that they occurred since the market took a downturn. It's like I don't trade, right? I've never been a good trader, and I've never been a trader at all. But every time I think about it, I get palpitations. So for me, like, that's not for me, right? So I understand that it can be a nerve-wracking thing to be up all night checking different charts and looking for patterns and trying to figure out entries and exits and leverage and all those sorts of things. This is why people who advocate for Bitcoin generally don't recommend trading, because it's the kind of behavior that gets you into this sort of thing. It causes you to lose your morality and to take bets, outsized bets that you otherwise shouldn't be taking. And if you do that for a living, I think if you don't have the the intellectual, moral, or other sort of character level stamina to withstand that, you fall victim to this sense that you have to keep winning. You have to keep making the next trade better than the last trade, and if you mess up a trade, you have to try to make twice as much on the next one. It's a cycle that I think causes a lot of people to lose sense of who they are.
And I think for Sam, he might have been defined by this winning. If we look at trading and we say, okay, he's a successful trader, well, what does that mean? That means he made a lot of money, right? But what does that also mean? He made a lot of bets and he was right. So he has this kind of streak. He has this gambler's mentality where he knows more than you. He's got the inside juice. He's going to make more money on this than you've ever made in your life. And that's what he's good at. And if he starts losing, right, the market turned down. You're saying that if this company started 2019, they don't have the experience of the previous Bitcoin crashes and all that we'd lived through. And they never pulled eject. They never stopped funding this company until they got found out about it, because it has to be multiple transactions sending over to this other company. It's not just one, whoosh, all the money. It's multiples. And very interesting. Let's see if we can get some of the listeners up. I'm going to go ahead and invite Return of the Wolf and Anton up to speak. If you guys want to just give us your opinion on Sam's ethics or lack of ethics.
You made a really good point just now also, which is that he built a persona. He has this reputation to uphold. Suddenly he's on the cover of Forbes. He's one of the wealthiest people, at least on paper, in the world, one of the youngest billionaires in the world. And that's a lot to try to maintain, especially in a market like Bitcoin and crypto, where things can change so quickly. And you have, seen historically 70 to 90% drawdowns in a bear market. And I think a lot of people who jump in during the bull market, they're not prepared for that. They don't believe it can go as low as it's going to go, and it often overextends to a point where it's far lower than you ever imagined it would be. And that's really a sign that for many people that the market is completely over, that it's dead, right? We've seen the Bitcoin is dead posts. There's hundreds of them over the course of the last decade. And obviously people come in at different times and they have different experiences. But I think if you're making a lot of winning bets in a bull market, you think you can outsmart the bear market, and clearly he didn't.
Well, and not only do you get the Bitcoin is dead posts, you get the people dancing on your grave. I follow this guy and I think he's the best. He's textfiles.com, Jason Scott. He's an archivist for the Internet Archive, and he hates Bitcoin and he hates cryptocurrency. And he is so happy right now. He's calling this his Christmas gift. He doesn't care that retirement funds lost their money or that banks and hedge funds and other kind of random people are going to go down and all that. He's just dancing and dancing and dancing. And I'm quietly letting him have it. I'm like, oh, I don't say anything because he'll ban or block you if you mention crypto. He'll instantly block you. And at the same time, I'm like, I could buy you some new VCRs, man. If only you take Bitcoin donations, I could be there with that VCR money for you. We can get this thing going, get this archive kicking. And he just hates crypto. So those people,
I know that guy. I know exactly who you're talking about. And yeah, he's not a fan of Bitcoin. And surprisingly, neither is Chelsea Manning, which was funny because I was on a space the other night. Actually, I think I was watching the Bitcoin Magazine live show, and they had it was an interview with Julian Assange's wife talking about WikiLeaks in the early days, which is that was sort of my early window into Bitcoin. That's what kind of got me thinking about it. And clearly, Chelsea Manning was caught up in all that, and so she posted something about maybe a year ago on Twitter. She had a Raspberry Pi and said, what should I do with this? And I commented, you should run a Bitcoin node. And she immediately wrote no.
Instant response.
Surprisingly not a fan of Bitcoin.
You got a response, all right.
Yes.
Yeah, it's funny that the people who like Bitcoin and don't like Bitcoin and how they come down to it. I was going to say another nice thing. Everybody's down about the FTX and they're down about the price, and we're on all the news and everything, but we're also getting into a lot of other shows. I can say, even though people in the chat were mad at Howard Stern, I'm going to mention him again. So, there you go. But I was listening to Howard Stern and he did about half an hour on crypto. And yeah, most of it was negative. He was making fun of the Matt Damon commercial. He was making fun of the FTX. He's saying how his people lost all the money. But there was a little thread in there where the one guy, I think it might have been Mehmet, but he said, remember that crypto that I bought you in 2015? It's still up. It's still up.
Dude, we have to orange pill Howard Stern. That would be a coup.
I wish, but I mean, he's very much, once he's made his decision, he's 100% decided on it. And him and Gary both said the same thing. They came to it and they said, I don't understand crypto, so I don't like it. And I'm also
you've seen the same thing with Bill Maher, and you've seen it with John Oliver. Like every one of these talk show people, they all have a hot take on it. They all hate it. They don't take the time to understand it, and that's the mainstream culture. They're the mouthpiece of it. So I don't know. I think that we're a long way from that level of adoption, and I think an incident like this where people now associate Bitcoin and crypto together as this complete Ponzi scheme, even though we know better. We know there's a difference. It's going to take a while for someone to come out of the woodwork again and maybe endorse something like this.
Well, I still think crypto is a nice generic for the whole Bitcoin industry, even though everyone's trying to rebel against that. And they're like, Bitcoin is not crypto. I know it to be true. And then it's like, but it's full of, cryptography, right?
Well,
it's
this is where you and I differ, I think, because crypto, if you look back at the original definition as used by the cypherpunks and used by Hal Finney, crypto means cryptography. And so crypto is now shorthand for anything that includes hashing and public-private keys and all that. It doesn't speak to the nature of the differences of what Bitcoin and all the other cryptocurrencies are. So it's become something that you can use as a catch-all for the entire space. And I think that's now damaging to Bitcoin's reputation, because they are entirely different things. And most people,
but it's also damaging.
Are casually observing. Don't know
it's also damaging to PGP's reputation. Think about PGP just out there providing pretty good privacy, and now they see their good word crypto torn down with these scammers.
Absolutely, which is why I think we need to take back crypto. We really need to take it back to its roots and return to PGP, return to the original definition, and never use it again to speak of a financial instrument.
Oh, but that's not going to happen. It's going to be generic like Kleenex. Everybody loves a generic. We got Morgan up here. I wanted to get Morgan a chance to get in here to say hello. Morgan, what do you think about SBF's ethics? Does he have any?
That's a very philosophical question. I think that I've read a few of his text messages and DMs with journalists recently in the last 24 hours to kind of peer into some strange man's personality when you do that. And it seems like he was a young kid who got a lot of money and felt like he could take advantage of people by playing a character. And he was very aware that he was playing a character, because he mentioned his acting and his using of wokeness and certain words to make sure people liked him. And I think that if someone says that and they're aware that they're doing that, they're not just doing it like automatically, subconsciously, but they're aware that they're doing that. That's kind of on one side of the coin immoral, on another side of the coin good business. So as a Bitcoin person, I would say that's immoral, and as a business person, I would say that was how you do business. But like, the fallout is not how you do business, and so maybe his responses are very immoral. The way he's been tweeting and not publicly speaking properly about what happened, and I think that's kind of an immoral act that he's doing. But the way he raised money and shook hands with all these people in power, I wouldn't call any of that immoral. That's just good business. But you get to know someone's real moral clock or compass by how they deal with disaster. I think we're definitely learning how his childlike behavior in the response is not a good thing. And all that good business backdoor stuff he was doing is not showing face in this disaster, So I don't know. I try not to judge people, especially people I don't know. I will say I think it's pretty immoral of all the investors that gave him money, like Kevin O'Leary and Mr. Football Star and all of these people that endorsed him, like class action lawsuit, Shaq, and all these people suing him like he was the bad guy, when they were the ones that gave this kid money and didn't know what he was doing with it. I think that's a little immoral to blame him when you throw billions of dollars at a 30-year-old and you don't even know what he's doing with it. It's kind of your fault. And so I think I would never defend, any of this stuff, but we can't point the finger at him solely, There's a lot of, like I said the last time we talked, there's a lot of people around him, the village. When it's the president or the CEO, the leaders get blamed, but there's always the minions around you that do stuff, and the talking heads, the advisors. I mean, who gives a 29-year-old billions of dollars and doesn't know what he's doing with it? That's a little fishy to me.
Well, I agree. And early on, we had those stories on Twitter where the guy said, I was a junior account executive and I copy and pasted the Excel spreadsheet into the document like I was told to, and I just got fired. And that was the example of they didn't do any due diligence. They just copy and pasted it. A couple days later.
And that was Sequoia, right?
I think
That
it
was the guy
was.
that worked at Sequoia, which is insane that they've given multiple billions of dollars to Uber and Lyft and Google and Facebook, and that's their practice. That's how their minions work. That's scary.
I think that builds a little into what we said earlier about winning, that Sequoia was winning with these strategies, so they stuck with them. Daniel, did you have more on this?
It's also, it's institutional laziness. It's people who don't want to do the work. They want other people to do the work for them, and you see how that resulted with all these companies and individuals just saying, "Well, I trust this company's opinion, and I'm not going to do my own work to do the research." And so, there's so many points of failure, and they can all point fingers at each other, but what it comes down to is no one's doing any research, and it's obvious. So then you end up with institutional FOMO, where people just throw money at anything, which is the VC culture in a nutshell.
I want to say, have you seen, Daniel, have you seen the show Silicon Valley?
Of course.
Okay, so I think it's first or second season when they're doing their VC raising, and they're going to all the VCs, and the crazy dude that was their host, who ran the house, the comedian guy, I can't remember his name. He put his balls on the table, and at the VC's like, $50,000 mahogany table, and then and that was like, look, we don't need your money. Look, I'm gonna put my balls on the table. Fuck you, man. And then like later on, they needed money, and that guy came back to them and was like, you know what? You put your balls on my table, and he like put his balls on their little IKEA table in their office and goes, screw you, I'm not giving you your money. I think that is the biggest, most honest window into VC culture and Menlo Park. And if you've never been there in Silicon Valley, that's how all those guys that sign checks are, So imagine this kid. I mean, we don't know SBF personally. I don't know anyone that knows him personally, but imagine him and his girlfriend Alameda and some other little, minions around there, and some little, posse going into some VC room and doing the equivalent of that somehow, and just impressing the shit out of some dumb VC guy. Like, wow, that guy's balls, man. He put his balls on my table. He must be a fucking great accountant and a beautiful programmer. I love this guy. Give him a check, and that's their form of due diligence. How ballsy are you? Literally.
In a way, we do have that story. There's the story where Sam's in the meeting and he's playing the video game League of Legends. And the whole time he's kind of just spouting out buzzwords and Bitcoin future and, dollars on. And then they say at the time, the guy looks around his screen. He was playing the video game the whole time.
Well, I mean, that was his arrogance in, I've already gotten money from people. I'm going to definitely get money from these people. I don't even need to tell them the truth of what I'm doing with that money, and they're going to give it to me. And that confidence is always good to be used as an entrepreneur, but also if you're just blindly using that and you really don't even know what you're doing with that money, that's pretty stupid. And apparently he said he didn't know what he was doing with all that money. He openly tweeted that. So it's not that he was just using that as a raise money skill, an ego manipulate VC skill, which is cool if you could do it and you could get someone to sign you a check. That's great, but you better actually know what you're doing. And to compare him to Mark Karpalais, Mt. Gox's CEO and head programmer at the time, at least Mark knew how to write PHP code and knew how to explain how the trading engine worked and knew how the website actually worked with HTML. And, maybe he understood the books a little bit. And that guy had to bow like Sabaku with a samurai sword to his head in Japan. I still haven't seen this kid do any of that. And how much involved in the actual exchange was he, like monetary wise and programming wise? Because he may not have known shit and actually was playing League of Legends because he actually didn't know how to trade, and he didn't actually do the arbitrage himself, and he didn't even know how FTX's software worked. That's what's scary. I would have rather seen Mark Karpalis get all this money back and come back and rebuild Mount Gox. At least he knew how to write code.
By the way, don't you think it's interesting that now, in the wake of all this, Mark Karpelis and Do Kwon and the Three Arrows Capital guys, they're all coming back to talk about it, like as if their opinions matter. Because
they didn't do the worst. They weren't the worst now. They're not the top or the bottom of the totem pole now. They're like the fox and the wolf and the owl in the middle. They're not the turtle and the eagle,
Well, and Morgan, I look at it kind of the other way, where it's now so much easier to do a scam. That in the old days, Karpelis had to do all that work and learn PHP and actually know how the engine worked, and he bought the software from that other guy and all that. There was all that involvement. Now you can just run a scam like out of your house. Like this guy is just like, he got a scam in a box and he opened the box and there was a scam inside. He's like, I could do that. And what's amazing to me still is all these TV guys getting behind it. All these people, like you're saying, Tom Brady, Shaq, not only giving him money, signing off to be in the commercials, putting their reputations up. And then all these companies, especially whoever owned the Super Bowl, Fox, CBS News, all these people running these ads blindly for what we now know to be truly a Ponzi, truly a pyramid scheme. All the things they say about Bitcoin, they're like, Bitcoin's a scam, blah, 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 blah. Well, this was a scam. It was in the Bahamas. It was a fraud. They were just spending the money, hilly-nilly, wherever they wanted, whatever it was. And yet it was advertised on TV. It sponsored a major arena. It got into the fortune cookies. Like, it shows you how far marketing and advertising can go.
That guy's face was on the portable bathrooms in San Francisco, and that must mean you made it. If they put your fucking face and the company logo you made on a porta potty in the middle of downtown San Francisco, that's like peak Silicon Valley. Oh my God, what the fuck is going on? This guy literally put his face on shit.
All the magazines.
It was on a porta potty.
Yeah.
The portable, nice, very elegant bathrooms they have in the middle of the streets in San Francisco. They put this guy's face on a toilet. If that's not like peak shit coinery, what else is?
And one of the companies, they said that's why they did their investment. They're like, his face was on Fortune magazine. His face was popular. We knew the guy, so we put the money in. I saw his face
across the street from the U.S. Mint on a toilet, and I figured that was a great investment.
I figured I'm in right there. Just, put the money in. So we're also joined by Victoria from Satoshi's page. Let's just get Victoria's opinion here. What do you think about SBF's ethics? Does he have any? And I think it's an especially interesting question because on its face, he was out there promoting effective altruism. He did that video about how he's going to give away all this money. He donated to politicians, which I agree with Morgan, is a lot about just, good business, getting in there, pick a side, give them money, whatever you got to do. But Victoria, what do you think about Sam's ethics?
Well, I don't think stealing from a million people is terribly ethical. So, in spite of all of the good that he proposes to do, he's created an awful lot of suffering in the process of trying to be altruistic. I think, if you deep dive into the whole philosophy, I think there's a whole load of convoluted thinking behind all of that. But I suppose it's possible to convince people of anything if you kind of put them through a program of thinking. It comes across that he was a little bit brainwashed into that way of thinking. And of course, him being so young, especially surrounded by so many influential people, one wonders to what extent he was actually given the opportunity to learn to think for himself. How much of, often it's going through life and, coming across your own hard knocks that helps develop your own moral character. Whereas if, from what I hear, his parents were highly influential in actually helping him start the business in the first place, in which case, whose parents are actually helping you start your business in your 30s? I know, or late 20s. I know there are some people that do that, but, if you're an individual who's kind of had to figure that kind of stuff out yourself, you tend to you tend to come up against obstacles that you kind of have to figure out yourself, which help you develop your own moral character. But he was still, it seems like he was still very much under the influence of a lot of other people. As much as he was able to kind of talk independently in front of many important people, I think if he was still surrounded in such a close-knit community, I mean, you know, he was living in a commune, and obviously that can create a kind of groupthink mentality as well. So, yeah, I mean, in terms of moral character, I don't think he was really old enough to have fully developed his own independent character. I think I get the impression he was strongly influenced by a lot of powerful people behind the scenes, and I think they have a lot to answer for this whole debacle as well. At the moment, Sam is kind of getting the full brunt of all of the criticism, and there's not much thinking to kind of like widen who else may be responsible. I think it's almost like he was kind of put up as the bad actor to be the fool guy for everything else all of these powerful people behind the scenes are trying to do, because he's clearly connected to a lot of people, some who we have no idea about.
I fully agree with that.
Yeah. So that would be my summary of the situation. The little I know about it, I mean, I hadn't even heard of him until last week. So obviously, like everyone else, you know, I'm kind of diving into the story and seeing how bad things are. But you know, my impression on the face of it is there's way, way, way more to this story than we can even begin to figure out right now.
I have a question though. It's, you know, because you said that, you know, at the age of 29, you know, he's still kind of a child mentality, and you may not have developed enough sense of right and wrong. But you know, if you go back and listen to some of the things he said a year ago, he spoke like an adult. He spoke about altruism. He spoke about all the things he wanted to accomplish to bring good things into the world and help with major issues like poverty, climate change, disease, all those sorts of things. And he spoke like someone who knew the subject matter. And so, you know, it sort of like blows my mind that he could be that depraved and that controlled by other people that he wouldn't be able to find a moral code.
Daniel, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Do you have children?
I do.
Okay. And I think that is, I have no children, but I've raised children, and I was my mother's Lamaze partner as a kid and took care of a little brother as a child. But I think you can pretend to be an adult all you want until you have your own child, and you have to raise a child in a world where your actions are changing the world that your child is living in. And I think he's probably deprived of that, the idea that he's acting as an adult, and until you have a child or you're responsible for a child, you really don't know what it is to not be a child until you have to take care of a child. You could pretend to be an adult all you want, but that doesn't really happen until you change diapers or you have to make sure a kid doesn't die. And I think he's deprived of that. And maybe he has no maternal, fatherly like instincts, which probably brings the moral compass straight when you have that happen. Maybe that's just my 2 cents on that.
And
maybe
I think you made a really good point there. You're right. Having kids changes you when you're suddenly responsible for, you know, what I like to refer to as a little kamikaze that's trying to actively kill itself every minute of every day, and you have to keep them alive. It is.
I think
totally
that's probably why that these people were able to influence him, because he was in a childlike mindset, because he's still a kid. You know, when your balls drop, that doesn't mean you become a man. When you have to take care of other life forms, that kind of really does it more. And he hasn't maybe had that happen yet. And so these people around him were like, well, he listens to us. He does. He looks like an adult. He talks like an adult, but we can tell him what to do like a child still. And that's unfortunately the perfect puppet for people in power.
Yeah, and I think it's frighteningly easy to brainwash people, especially if you're in close proximity. I mean, I think with the involvement of his parents in his business in his 20s, I think says everything, really. I wonder how much opportunity they've actually given him to, figure things out for himself. I mean, he may well have gone through the process of going to university or whatever, but some parents are stay much more closely connected to their kids and highly influential if they don't give them the space to kind of grow. And it may well be that even if he wanted to have his own independence, if he's got very controlling parents who were monitoring everything that he did and with very powerful connections with their own agendas that he slotted into. I mean, obviously, I don't know the guy. I'm just guessing, just from the things that I've seen. But that all raises my suspicion as well. I think it's very difficult to judge him on his own moral character when he's not really been given the opportunity to develop it. I just think he was planned as the fool guy right from the beginning. And I feel a bit sorry for him, really. I think there are many, many others who are connected to this who should have taken responsibility. I mean, for goodness sake, if you've got investors who are actually interviewing this guy while he's playing video games and they were impressed by that rather than concerned, I mean, I'm sorry, but they hold some responsibility apart from anything else, because they're investing other people's money into these cryptocurrency exchanges. So
they also gave him legitimacy by doing that, and that made the plebs and the young retail investors trust him more with their money.
Absolutely, propaganda is very, very powerful, and so who's responsible for putting him on the cover of Fortune magazine? And everyone else who hyped this guy, why aren't they doing their due diligence? And
the same people that put Theranos as CEO up there, it's the same people that take advantage of young, spirited entrepreneurs that their parents cuddled too much.
Yeah, exactly. So there are many, many connections here, and yes, even though Sam might be his own child who is overly influenced, that doesn't mean he escapes responsibility at all. But I think the people who raised him and the people around him, many of whom we will probably never find out who they really are, bear an awful lot of responsibility as well. I just think that he was the public face of it.
Let's open this up.
I have an idea, Thomas. Maybe this can answer your title. A Buddhist monk told me once that one hand is wisdom and one hand is morality. And when we wash our hands under a sink, we don't wash them with one hand at a time. We use them both to lather each other. And so the more wise you get, the more moral you get. The more moral you get, the more wise you get. But I think Sam was probably just washing his hands with all these wisdom people. You're wise, we're wise, trust us. And he maybe didn't have that moral person giving him, the moral conversations and the moral advice. He just had a bunch of wisdom people around him, thought they were the wise men. And that you always need a guru next to you who tells you to shut the fuck up and you're being stupid,
Well, yeah, I mean, kings are always surrounded by advisors, and actually they carry more power. Certainly throughout history, whenever you've had a leader, some of those advisors have carried incredible power, and also the consequences. When the king decided that he was fed up with them, it's like, a lot of the advisors would help them become a king in the first place, and then when the king was powerful enough, a lot of them then ended up getting their heads chopped off. So
yes, man,
So there are a lot of dynamics when it comes to these sorts of situations, and most of it is often hidden from us. So yeah, there's way, way more going on than I think we can even begin to imagine, I'm quite sure.
Well, but a lot of it we can see. His parents were law professors. They work at Stanford University. He's got other connections like that. We know that Caroline's father was Ellison, and that Ellison was the mentor of Gensler, and that Gensler's the SEC chairman. And this helps a little bit. This definitely helps you get in the door. Maybe you get a little bit of lighter treatment. But at its core, I think there still needs to be some due diligence, just a little bit. Now, when I used to work for the lawyers, you could walk around the lawyer's office, and nothing against the lawyers, but they all kind of had square backgrounds. It's like most of them family, picture of the family, pictures of the children, and you're like, oh, I could trust this lawyer. He's got a family, he's got children, he's tied to the community. He's not just going to run off with my money. He's not going to not finish my case because it's hard or because he has, gambling or something else he wants to do, right? With this Sam guy, when you hear the very basics of the story, and at some point someone has to know, I don't know if you work there or if you're investing in it, you have to say, okay, well, where do you live, Sam? Oh, I live in a giant apartment in the Bahamas with 5 of my best friends. Oh, really? And which ones? And what do they do? And who do you date, Sam? And who's your girl? And if there's any kind of questions like this, I think they would have not invested, and they would have warned people about it. They would have said, that's trouble. But I don't know that person yet. I don't know if we have a guy out there who's been waving his hand against FTX this whole time. And maybe he had a meeting with him. Maybe he knew something. I've seen a lot of people who are like, oh yeah, in hindsight, in retrospect, when I think about it, it does seem very odd. But surely there must be someone who walked away from this guy. Where are those people?
Oh, see, we got to go down Menlo Park and knock on every door at every VC office and say, show us your blog books on who came in here and pitched to you, and see all the VC companies that FTX pitched to there in Silicon Valley that said no, because that's all not necessarily public, but there's records of that. And I'm sure there's plenty of people that told him you're crazy,
Now to play devil's advocate with Victoria's idea here, maybe there isn't this trail of failure. Maybe everything just kind of went well, and he pitched the idea over the dinner table to some powerful people, and the other powerful people invested, and then they all just kept investing, and then everyone else followed on. But it does seem like a very strange situation where so many people just follow on and no one does their due diligence at all. And it's set up in the Bahamas. Like, if they had to put at the bottom of the ad, like, FTX is set up in the Bahamas, you might never see your money again. Side effects include ... We have all these horrible ads here in the US, you guys don't know, but they're all prescription ads, and they all come with a little, the side effects include horrible medical conditions we never say.
Blindness, lots of feeling.
Yeah, there was nothing like that on these FTX commercials. The networks just ran them like, side effects include a Ponzi scheme that could cost you all your money and make everyone globally lose faith in Bitcoin. Oh, well, that's pretty bad. Maybe we shouldn't do that.
I saw his face on the side of a porta potty. I've never opened an FTX account specifically because of that. That shit scared me literally.
See, so at least in that case, the advertising worked. Daniel, what do you think? If you saw Sam's face everywhere, like you said, 2019, this guy just appeared. Sure, we were used to Jesse Powell and Brian Armstrong and a lot of other players in this industry, but all of a sudden we had a brand new player, and he was greater than everyone else. I heard about him first when he bought Blockfolio. Daniel's gone. Victoria, when did you hear of him? You say it was even more recent than that?
Yeah, just last week. I had no idea who he was. I'd vaguely heard of FTX because I had the Blockfolio app on my phone, and then all of a sudden, because when the whole thing kicked off, I looked at my phone and suddenly realized I had the FTX app on my phone because, of course, it got converted. But then that made me realize that actually I did have some connection, but not of my choosing. This is what happens when a business that you haven't consented to is kind of taken over. And also the capture of people's data who didn't want anything to do with FTX. I think that's an interesting line of questioning as well. But no, I didn't hear about him since last week was the first time I heard of it. And to your point about the fact that maybe he was just a really good investor and the whole thing grew organically, I don't think so. I don't think you get that big that quickly by accident. I think it was planned.
I think it was a montage. I just watched The Secret to My Success, this 80s movie, and all the exciting business stuff happens during a montage. They're just like, everything's going well, big money's coming in, dun 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 dun, dun. And Sam just rode to the top.
I think it's possible, but ultimately unlikely.
I mean, there's always a little bit of ignorance more than like evil doing and malicious planning. A lot of stupidity happens on accident and carelessness and negligence. And I think to reiterate that a lot of the VC people are stupid and they don't know what they're doing and they're spending other people's money and they have like blank checks and they feel like it's their job to just throw money away like the grant and hopefully they get something back and it makes them feel important. And I think those people built up this guy who maybe other powerful people were like, oh, let's do some money laundering through a crypto exchange and put one up in our hands. And the VCs didn't know that. And they were just like, oh, Bitcoin, we're going to make a bunch of money on this kid. And like two separate collaborating parties collided and they weren't in on each other's agenda. And this kid and his little orgy party of friends in the Bahamas had no idea that they were being played by both sides like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think ignorance and just general stupidity has some part to play in the failure, but you don't get that successful without some level of
someone signed a check for sure.
Yeah.
And Victoria, you brought up something really interesting, which was you talked about the Blockfolio app being converted to FTX. The first time I heard about him was actually on a podcast. It was Sam Harris Making Sense, where it was kind of open forum for him to just talk about his altruism. And during that time, it was a year ago, the market was going insane. Prices were heading to an all-time high. Everyone thought Bitcoin was going to hit triple digit, six-digit figure. And so, yeah, he had an incredible run up. And it was probably the nature of the market that everyone wanted to FOMO in and took his word for it. But this is a kid who probably, I'm using the word kid because clearly that's what he is after, what we discussed here, probably didn't have much of a social life growing up. I can't speak to that directly, but, it seems like the kind of nerdy kid who probably didn't have a lot of friends in school. And suddenly he had all this money, he didn't know what to do with it, and was, let the whole thing go to his head. And now he could do anything he wanted. And clearly what he wanted to do was make more money than anyone had ever seen before. And so they all wanted to hitch their wagon to his star.
I think there were elements of that, definitely. People love to be associated with success, so it may well be that he attracted people like that. So there are elements. There may well be elements of that, but even so, you don't get that big that quickly without something else going on. I just don't believe it.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about the takeover of the Blockfolio app. What a clever move to get to everyone in crypto, because everyone I knew in crypto, they were all using the Blockfolio app and it didn't care what exchange you used, right? But one day it got taken over and it started recommending FTX, and I never made an account. And then they changed, like Victoria said, they changed the name of the app. The entire app became the FTX app. Now, certainly a little of this is there in what Binance did to CoinMarketCap. CoinMarketCap was the same kind of thing, a generic source of information. You find out what's going on with the altcoins. You could sort them and rank them and all that kind of stuff. But pretty soon, Binance purchased CoinMarketCap, and it didn't change that much. They just put in a thing on each one where it's like, if you want to buy this crazy altcoin, you can get it at Binance. And in the same way, FTX did that, but even going a step further, changing the name of the app.
Yeah, and of course, CoinMarketCap hadn't captured everyone's email addresses, but Blockfolio had. And so by buying out that business, you got access to a whole load of data, which was probably very valuable. And they may not be using it now, but who knows how they might use it in the future.
That makes me think of someone's tweet I saw yesterday that said, thanks to KYC and anti-money laundering policy, a bunch of criminals in the Bahamas now have millions of people's passports, phone numbers, IDs, and home addresses.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Which, that's all exchanges, but maybe in the hearing that's going to show up in Congress in the next day or two, I don't know when that is, but I saw that there was one that was arraigned. Maybe someone could bring that fact up, that decentralization or what we were supposed to be building, decentralized finance tools, and Bitcoin by itself is not supposed to have personal identifying information attached to it. That's why Satoshi did not want IP addresses to even be used to send Bitcoin to an IP address. And the whole reason that this whole system was built on Bitcoin's back was to not have personal identifying information in merchants, that you could just send Bitcoin and they didn't need your credit card and your home and your phone number and your name, so that some 12-year-old wouldn't steal it from their website. And now we have a honeypot of criminal activity that is in possession of privacy data that, every marketer's wet dream, that FTX is going to auction off all their assets. I'm sure that privacy data is considered an asset that they could sell to anyone. And, it's better than being leaked on the black market. It's official. And so that's got to be brought up. Like, why are we giving personal identification information to exchanges that, whether they're good actors now, that they may not be one day, like this. And they're even getting regulators trusting them, and then they go bad, and now they're sitting on personal identifying information that can be compromising U.S. citizens and consumers. That should be brought up in court, or at least in Congress, that, like, this is why we don't want KYC stuff pushed on Americans when it comes to finance. It's worse than Facebook taking your data and selling it. This is financial data and your home address and things like that. So maybe that should be really brought up,
Yeah, and your banking information and your household income and all those things are available to these types of criminals. This is exactly the thing that Andreas Antonopoulos made videos about, specifically about how no matter how secure you think the data is, it always leaks. It always gets hacked. It becomes a target, like you said, a honeypot for hackers, scammers, anyone who has any nefarious goals to try to impersonate you, take advantage of you, try to sell you things, try to scam you in any way. This is just exactly the thing that Bitcoin was designed to do away with. Here we are creating nothing but centralized services that people are willfully giving their information to without even thinking about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And not only that, with Blockfolio, with everyone kind of keeping track of which coins they had as well. You've got all that
Yes.
data. And there were also stories of the fact that the app had been hacked. So in the process of deleting it, you could accidentally open it and get that malware on your phone, and it was never actually an app that you wanted in the first place. You downloaded it because you wanted something else, and in the process of a dysfunctional company taking over something that you trusted, you could expose yourself to all sorts of things without your consent. So it raises a whole lot of issues, and I think whoever is fighting the legislators definitely needs to make a record of all of these points and research them and present them, very avidly to the regulators, because one of the problems with regulations is the unintended consequences. That's always the problem with regulations. And of course, regulations go along with the existing, financial system. I mean, basically, fiat currency is based on the rules that we make. It's not a free market currency because it's not operating in the way it was originally designed, like the gold standard. And so, for it to operate at all, the idea is that you can manage the different pots of money to make sure that it's fairly distributed in society. And you make laws in order to help facilitate that. That was the original idea. But 100 years later, we're all observing that it hasn't worked like that at all. And every year that goes by, it just gets worse and worse. And I really think it's going to reach a tipping point where people aren't going to take it anymore. And fortunately, we've got an opportunity with BTC, but with Bitcoin. But the whole conversation is being diluted by these other cryptocurrencies. The devastation of this exchange completely devastates the whole reputation. The people who are in the space understand the difference between Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, but the average person doesn't. And, especially with a lot of these regulators now starting to push CBDCs onto us. It really is a race against time to try and educate people and to help make them realize the choice that they have in front of them that they're making. But people tend to lose their minds when they get scared. It's like the pandemic. People lose all ability to be rational, and they want to be guided by someone else who seems to know what they're doing. But the trouble is, if the people who supposedly know what they're doing don't have a clue, the danger is they can take you in definitely the wrong direction. So we need to be very, very careful, and we really need to advocate to our friends, families, and colleagues and help them realize exactly what's going on. It's very important.
Well, I'm still kind of marveling at how clever this Blockfolio takeover was. If you think about it, like you're saying that he gets all the data from the app. I know a lot of people who never linked Blockfolio to an exchange, and you'd kind of think of it as like a notepad. You're like, well, on my notepad, I've got this much of this and this much of that. And then you could see it on a chart, which was the benefit of the app. But if I think about that in aggregate, if there were 1,000 users or more or whatever, Sam just got 1,000 users notepads. He got 1,000, how much they had or how much they wished they had or what they were thinking about buying or selling, because you could kind of test out your trades. You could kind of look at your charts in there. So I think that's incredibly clever to get the data. And it is a big difference, like Victoria said, that whereas CoinMarketCap, I just went there and I left behind my IP address, right? But with an app like Blockfolio, you have to go through the Apple App Store. You have to have that verification where they really did have some useful information on me. And if they're lucky, they could buy more information and connect that as well. And I think Morgan also had a great point on the information that they were forced to collect. Certainly for a libertarian company or libertarian minded person, you'd be like, no, we don't want to collect IDs. No, this is bad. But if you look at the other way, like Morgan's saying, you're creating this fantastic collection of data that you could sell off afterwards. And we'll all have to keep an eye on FTX. And once upon a time in the future, there'll be a story and they'll be like, yeah, they're buying the logos and the leftover company data and something like that, but they're not getting the debt. And whoever does that, who's gonna end up with our Blockfolio information, as well as anybody who used FTX, all of their passports, all of their financial information, all of their bank accounts. So it is a valuable thing still.
My assumption would be that someone does chain analysis on phone numbers, IP addresses, home addresses, and even though you didn't connect a Bitcoin or Ethereum address to the notepad amounts of what you were watching, all I have to do is go look up those amounts on the blockchain and correlate them to an address. If I see you were watching an Ethereum, a Dogecoin, and a Bitcoin amount, and I find those three amounts, I could connect the dates, I could connect the phones, I could connect the home addresses from that information and build a whole profile NSA style on what coins you had, even that you are watching that weren't connected to an address. Like that all could be done by most likely a law enforcement or a federal agency or an intelligence agency, but like whoever buys that, if they're, working with the cops, that's like all that data from all these people that thought they weren't sharing their addresses, they were just watching what they had on cold storage, that all that got spiderweb connected, by someone, whether if it's happened yet or it already did or it will, that data is there now and it's never going to go away.
Well, and in a way, though, Morgan, the cops might be the good side of that equation. If the police were looking at it, it might be worse where organized crime or something like that is looking at it as people to steal from. And they're gathering all this data and they're connecting it to the FTX data, and they've bought all this data. So it really is pretty important who wins these bankruptcy auctions, as much as we won't even hear about the sale until it's done. It's not like we get a chance
the ethics and moral question, Thomas, is who gets the data one day and not the money, because the money's all made up. All FTT token money and all stable coin money, that shit was all just made up. But the data is real, and who owns that data in the long run has a big chunk of the entire cryptocurrency community's info in their pocket, and then that is either used by Dr. Evil or by Jesus, and we don't know who's going to get it yet.
Or the IRS.
And not just the IRS versions in every other country around the world that are even scarier than the IRS,
I would love to see a real deep investigation of this by a journalist. I don't know if anyone has even brought that up yet, but there needs to be some investigative journalism on this specific issue, just on the Blockfolio app, not even anything else connected to FTX, because you're right. This is exactly what it was. It was purchasing customer data to be used for any purpose that they could dream of. And now, if this falls into the hands of anyone,
I'll send it to Bitcoin Magazine as an idea, since Thomas has these recorded. But if no one does it, I'll write some shit up. I know how to write, so I'll message Bitcoin Magazine and we'll see if they will be interested in posting something like that, because I've written for them before.
Well, I do think that the Blockfolio aspect of this hasn't really been explored. And I used to just say it as, oh, I'm upset because I like the Blockfolio app. But as we discussed this more with Victoria, and we talked about the underlying data, and everyone kind of admits to themselves that they used it like a notepad, right? They're like, well, what if I had 10 Bitcoin? What if I had 100? Whoa, gee whiz, and you could look at the chart. And then for some people, I'm sure it was fantasy money. They're like, oh yeah, what if I bought this and that? And I look at that little fun app. But for other people, like Morgan's saying, they're unintentionally revealing their wealth to this application, which was purchased by this giant scam. And I figure if we don't talk about it, it will get forgotten. It'll get swept up in the rest of it, and no one will ever talk about the Blockfolio aspect.
Well, Thomas, that's when I learned about SBF. It was when the app, was bought, and I was always in attention on what was going on in the Bitcoin company space, and I was like, very unmoved by that. I was like, oh, someone's buying this app. I had no idea who it was. Didn't know it was going to be an exchange. I just thought someone was going to add it, like Zero Block was added to blockchain.com, and then they made it go away. I thought that was what was going to happen. I didn't realize they were going to build a new exchange on top of that app, but that was the first time I ever even heard of FTX.
Well, and what a clever idea in retrospect to build your exchange on top of this coin tracking app.
That probably means that coin analytics was the core reason FTX was made, not to just move money around, but the data might have been the whole reason this was all put together, which could be holy shit big,
It's got potential. Let's see if we can bring up the audience here. I'm going to ask some people to speak. If you guys want to come up here and tell us your ideas about Sam's morals, or if you're interested in this Blockfolio connection, which is, I think it's a little bigger than I would think it was when we started this chat. So maybe we'll chat about this again in the future. Just try to raise awareness around this idea. All right, not everyone is running up to the stage here, so I think we'll head towards the end of the show. Just one recap. Let's go Victoria, Daniel, and then Morgan. Victoria, what do you think about what we've talked today about Sam's ethics? And what about the idea here that the Blockfolio app takeover could be much more important than anyone else is paying attention to?
Yeah, I mean, Sam's moral character and a whole host of other people connected to him, I think, all needs to be examined. That's how I would summarize that up. And yeah, I think data mining is incredibly valuable. I mean, you just have to go onto a website and, reject their cookies and see how many companies want access to the fact that you just clicked on that website when you realize how valuable data is. So yeah, you're right. I mean, even if all of the coins lose all their value, that data is valuable for the people who know how to use it. So yeah, it's definitely a subject that is worth talking about and raising awareness of as well.
And Daniel, what do you think?
I think people have been desensitized to the lack of privacy that now exists in every place that they go, whether it's a financial institution, a social media site. It's almost like people don't even care about these things anymore. And I think as someone who takes Bitcoin seriously and takes privacy seriously, that's alarming because now, like everyone here said, the data is out there. It exists somewhere on a server, a centralized server that can now be accessed by anyone. You don't know who's going to end up with this data. And so we've seen all sorts of hacks over the years. Every healthcare company, every financial institution, every few years, even every few months, you get a report about something like this happening. And then, what does your credit card company do when there's a data breach? Oh, they send you a year of free credit monitoring. That doesn't matter in this space, because with Bitcoin and with cryptocurrency, it's so easy to I think give up your privacy and then put everything at risk. So it's extremely alarming. It's probably the biggest story of this whole thing as far as I'm concerned now that I'm thinking about it. Of course, the loss of the people's funds is tragic. That also makes the case for self-sovereignty, for cold storage, for holding your own keys. But also holding your own privacy is incredibly important. And I think people aren't taking that seriously enough.
Well, Morgan, I think you got Watergate on your hands right here.
It's all right, man. I didn't want to be called Deep Throat, but I'll fucking do it, man.
Well, I think if you write up just a little bit about what we're talking about, Blockfolio being taken over, and that a lot of people used it as a notepad, combined with that kind of larger libertarian argument that SBF collected everyone's passports and they held up the ID pictures and all that kind of thing, and that data is going to be sold afterwards, and that the Blockfolio data is going to be sold afterwards, and that the trading data, and just kind of recentering this on not just the money, but also the data, and
personal identifying data.
And what a clever thing they did, taking over Blockfolio, and that it was.
And you know what? I would ask you, since you and me are some of the old guys in the room, how many times in the past, because Mt. Gox was in Japan and was very anonymous, using BitInstant and other intermediaries to wire money to it. Is this potentially the biggest set of customer personal identifying data in one place in the crypto space so far? Because I know Coinbase probably has more, and Kraken and Circle and those things that bought Poloniex, I'm sure they have some data, but this must be the biggest personal identifying information data set available since cryptocurrency was created. That's my assumption.
Well, and this is definitely going to go up for sale. This is the biggest set that's going to go up for sale. So maybe that's in the headline somewhere. Do the YouTube
because,
catch thing, yeah.
What's Kraken CEO's name again? I can't remember his name.
Jesse Powell.
Jesse. Yeah, I saw Jesse on Bloomberg the other day saying, and he was personally asked, "Are you considering buying any of the assets or the company?" And he said, "Well, they have some interesting stuff available if it goes up for auction." He literally said, "Well, they have maybe we could buy their customers, or maybe we can buy some of their licenses, but we already have the exchange software and things that they have. We don't want any of those assets, the digital assets." But he specifically said we can maybe buy their customers and maybe buy their licenses. And so when the auction goes up, the hot commodity is not going to be the shit coins. It's going to be the licenses and then the customers. And if you buy the customers, you're buying their data, their personal identifying data. So I'm sure that the fact that he said that and he was already in discussions with them, I'm sure they already hawked the personal identifying data to Kraken and said, "Hey, would you be willing to buy this from us? Because Binance doesn't want to buy it from us." And so they're probably already putting that stuff up for sale, which is scary to think about it now that they're also selling the Blockfolio chain analysis of everyone's wallets that were being watched. That's a heavy sentiment,
Morgan, do you remember it was, I think, a few years ago when Coinbase voluntarily sent all their customer records directly to the IRS? So
yeah,
knew exactly what people were trading, and so this is going to get subpoenaed. There's no question about it.
I will say, I remember Coinbase saying that the IRS asked for everything, and they only turned over anyone who traded more than $20,000 in one transaction, which was a couple hundred people at the time. But they publicly refused to give them the password to every Coinbase account. And so they may have been asked for personal identifying information and kind of fought it a little bit. That's what it seemed like to me. But FTX is not in a position to fight. They're just going to sell everything. They have no standing ground like Coinbase to go, "No, we're not going to do that. We have lawyers." They don't even have lawyers anymore, So that's even scarier, because I mean, Coinbase is a company, but in my opinion, it being in America and the way Brian speaks publicly, they're probably not necessarily a good or bad actor, a neutral actor, weighing a little bit on the good side. They have money to say fuck you. They have fuck you money, you know. And FTX doesn't have any Bitcoin. They have no fuck you money, so they're going to sell that data to whoever asks. And I imagine if the IRS, SEC, CFTC asked them today, hey, we want to see who was using this exchange for, you know, checking out terrorists. Oh, here's everything. You know, we have nothing left to sell. Would you buy it from us? Like, that's scary.
Well,
Don't forget, they still have to pay back the $16 million of naming rights on FTX Arena in Miami. So they need the money.
And I'm telling you right now that personal identifying data, it's not a commoditized thing publicly on how much it's worth, like how much is a phone number and a name and address worth and an email address. But I'll tell you, as someone who's worked with the military, if you could connect an IP address, a phone number, a Bitcoin address, an Ethereum address, a home address all together, that's money that would pay for that shit, which is scary.
Well, I think we're going to be talking about this more in the future. The blockchain data or the blockfolio information is a big deal, and it will be up for sale. Obviously, our best case scenario is that somehow the users would form a group. That group would raise a bunch of money, and then they'd get this data and destroy it. That's very unlikely. I think it's much more likely, like Morgan said, for someone like Kraken or Binance or another up-and-coming player, maybe a new organization wants to make a new exchange, to buy it with the guise of buying the customer list, but the reality of getting everything else, which might be far greater than what was previously imagined. I'd like to thank Morgan, Daniel, and Victoria for joining me up here. Everybody for hanging out. This is going to be recorded. It'll be on the World Crypto Network at worldcryptonetwork.com. Also, thanks to Proper Gull and Moonshine Fuel for hanging out in the chat. Good hanging with you guys too. We'll do these maybe more in the future. We'll try to schedule them like Daniel said, but it's kind of fun just to do them when I had an idea. Like I was watching that commentary and I was talking about character and ethics and, you know, does he have any? So thanks so much for joining us. Until next time, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.